Henry, good morning, sir. Where are you today?
Good morning. I'm calling in from New York City, so that's why I don't have my microphone today.
New
But looking
York
forward to.
City.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's raining. Not too bad, but yeah, here to have a conversation. Talk
Great.
about behavioral change and how we make
Oh,
that
man.
happen.
All right. I thought maybe we were here to talk about salsa, you know?
And guacamole.
Because do you remember that commercial back in the day? It was a salsa commercial. And they were like, this salsa's made in New York City. And the cowboys were like, New York City? And you couldn't have the salsa from New York City because it meant it wasn't good salsa. But you had to get that pace picante salsa, which I think was made in San Antonio.
Okay.
So
Maybe before my time.
all right. Well, I
Most
guess
things.
we'll stick to our area of expertise and talk about behavioral change. What specifically are we
There we
talking
go.
about today?
Yeah, so last episode we talked about the stages of change. The pre-contemplation, the contemplation, and the preparation, and we left off uh, sort of making this a two-parter, talking about action, the action stage of change.
Yeah.
Uh, Stefan, can you give us just a quick recap of the stages of change for our one listener?
Oh my goodness, sure. So that's great. Thank you for that reminder. So we really have two stages of change left to talk about today. So
Hmm.
we'll get into that. So our stages of change, we start with a stage called pre-contemplation, which that
Yep.
means I'm not even contemplating a change. I don't feel like I have a problem. I'm not
Yep.
interested in change. I don't really see any reasons, needs, requirements. I don't want to change. I don't need to change. No
Yep.
change. So that's pre-contemplation. Then we get into contemplation, which is really where the fun starts. That's the meat and potatoes of behavioral change, and I think a lot of what we do as providers. And in the contemplative stage, I have some reasons to change and some reasons not to change. So I'm truly in what we call ambivalence, where part of me is starting to see a need and understand, and then there's still a part of me that doesn't want to. So that is a very, very important stage of change. And a lot of what we do as addiction professionals is to help someone move through that stage, go
Yep.
from a place of ambivalence, which I think we talked about this last time, but ambivalence is really pure hell for
Hmm.
people with addictions, being both in and out at the same time.
Yep.
Then we move into a really important stage that I think we talked a lot about last time that often we believe that folks sort of skip over or skim a little bit, but it's this preparation stage. And this is where I've made a decision to make a change and now I'm getting ready to do it. So I'm
Hmm.
really consolidating resources, I'm getting structure, I'm making a plan, I'm working with professionals. I'm really getting ready to then go into what we're going to talk about today, which is the action stage. So I get
Yep.
fully prepared and ready to then go in and take action. And I think the idea here around preparation is it's, sort of ready, aim, then we shoot. And we're at the
Hmm.
shoot stage, right? Rather than, I think a lot of times behavioral change fails. And you think about this is any change, big changes like addiction changes, but even little lifestyle changes. People sort of get to this place where, okay, I'm going to make a change, and then they just try to start. And what happens is they're ill prepared, right? It's almost the opposite. It's sort of shoot, ready, aim.
Yep.
And so by spending some time going through this, we get to a place where hopefully we get into the action stage and we stay in the action stage because
Hmm.
what we want to do is then take the actions, make the behavioral change, and get to another stage that we'll talk about, which is really called maintenance.
Yep.
And I think it's important. One of the things we didn't mention last time, I don't believe, is at any point of this in addiction work, we can have what we call a relapse or a regression or a return to use,
Hmm.
right? At any of these stages, even once we're in the action stage. And I think people often miss that because they think, okay, great, my loved one, my son, my daughter, my spouse, they got into the action stage. They seemed very authentic and serious about wanting to make a change. They started to make a change and we had a return to use. what often I hear from families is when that happens is it must have been BS. They must have not been authentic about it. They were just putting on a show. And to be fair, sometimes they're right. Sometimes there was some manipulation happening. And a reoccurrence, a regression, return to use, that can happen at any stage. And it doesn't mean that someone was disingenuous about their desire. It's just that's how, unfortunately, behavioral change works.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's my recap, Mr. Maxwell. Did I lie at all there? Do you wanna add any or retract?
No, I think that's right on the money. Um, one of the things I was thinking about, and we're kind of jumping into it as you were talking, is I mean, I think we can view the stages of change as sort of linear when, like you said, motivation fluctuates, right? Motivation, just like anything else, is sort of a state of, perspective and attitude and energy level. And that's where, talking about preparation is so important, because if we don't have the necessary, I like to use the word infrastructure, right, to support the change separate and apart from motivation, which is fluid and does vary day to day. Uh, People can certainly be in a position where, despite being very motivated, they do have a return to use and they do continue to struggle.
Yeah.
And so I think that sort of leads into our topic today, very importantly, is how do we, A, and we talked about it last week, plan for change, and then B, what do we need to put in place to sustain the change over time? Because I think the hardest piece. I mean, I certainly, and I know you do too, spend time with a fair amount of people, struggling with addiction, who are really good at starting, right?
Yeah.
There's almost a perpetual cycle of the beginning stages of the behavioral change, right? And they're motivated to do it. They're really good at rebuilding their life, right? They're not great, or they struggle to sustain their life, right? Sustain the behavioral change, where it's like they get a new job, they engage in, recovery supports, they go to treatment, and there's this initial sort of burst of motivation that comes from the immediate short-term benefits that come from engaging in those things, right?
Yeah.
If you stop actively engaging in behaviors that harm you, and you surround yourself with good people, you'll tend to feel better, right? Relatively quickly. And but then what does it take to sustain that over time, right? Particularly when the sheen or the shine kind of wears off of that initial sort of burst of motivation.
Yeah. You bet. We often talk in recovery that on some level you've got to become the master of the mundane, because we don't like mundane.
Yeah.
We like big windfalls, high highs, low lows. Recovery's awesome. I'm not in withdrawal. It's fun. The lawman isn't breaking down my door. My family's getting off of my back. I'm dating, right? All the things like, a month sober, I've got a new girlfriend or a new boyfriend.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, it's just normal life. Well, that's not exciting. That's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what do they call it? Type 2 fun, right?
Type 2 fun.
There's some parallels there where it's like, if you take these actions repeatedly every day, despite not feeling into it all the time, you'll experience some long-term meaning, purpose, gratitude, all those things. In the long run, time to be determined
Yeah.
in a way that's not immediately gratifying, right? And that's hard for people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I think it's always fascinating to me, but it's like you never underestimate people's willingness to stop doing all of the things that got them well.
Hmm.
And we see that all the time, where people have put together really good structure, really good habits, good lifestyle, and they're doing all of the things. They're doing the quote unquote work. It works if you
Yeah.
work it, and they're doing the work.
Hmm.
And just like what you said starts to happen is, well, I need a full-time job, so I've got the job and that's most important.
Hmm.
And I'm tired, worked a long day. I don't need to go to my home group tonight. So
Hmm.
I'll miss I'll miss my meeting tonight, but it's fine. And I could use a couple extra minutes of sleep in the morning. So maybe I'll just skip my morning routine that includes my meditation practices, my recovery practices in the morning. I'll start it up again next week.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. Do I really need to be going to the gym and taking care of myself? And, I'm pretty busy and I've got a new girlfriend. So do I really need to hang out with my guys in recovery and do fellowship? And the next thing you know, all of those habits, rituals, and routines, because that's in the end of the day, what is this all about? In the action stage, it's developing and living into the habits, rituals, and routines of diligent, effective recovery. If
Yeah.
we can get to a place where we're doing that, we're going to have fulfilling recovery. The problem is while you're doing that, you don't necessarily feel bad.
Hmm.
So it's a different mindset, and the paradigm that a lot of people use is almost like a medication paradigm where I have a headache, so I'll take an aspirin. Well,
Hmm.
if I don't have a headache, well, then I don't take an aspirin. So people in recovery, well, I don't have a craving today, so I won't take the
Yeah.
recovery actions. Unfortunately, the problem there is that's not how recovery works. It's much more like a fitness than it is a symptom of distress. And what I mean by that is if you consistently engage in a fitness routine, you're going to then develop a certain level of fitness, certain level of cardiovascular fitness, strength, mobility, agility. You'll develop those things.
Yeah.
And you won't feel you can't necessarily like feel your fitness, right? You can't just sit there
Hmm.
and like feel it. And if you do the same thing and you think, well, I'm fit today, I don't need to continue to exercise. Well, little by little by little, that fitness will erode until all of a
Hmm.
sudden you're no longer fit. And you
Yeah.
still can't necessarily maybe feel it until it's too late.
Yeah.
The same is true for recovery. Is
Hmm.
little by little by little, you're removing all of the things that are in between you and a return to use, that are in between you and an addiction. Little by
Yeah.
little by little, you've worked for weeks, months, sometimes people, years to
Hmm.
develop an incredible defense against a relapse. And little
Hmm.
by little, you justify and talk yourself into removing those things until there's really nothing in between you and a use. And then what we say is professionals, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, what happens is all of a sudden then there's a relapse, a recurrence of use, and there's this, how did that happen?
Hmm.
And what we often talk about is the relapse happened long before the relapse actually happened.
Yeah.
But maybe before we get into there, let's maybe talk about, well, what is this action then? What are the things that people need to do, develop, those habits, rituals, routines, that lifestyle? What is the action? What is the work that people are taking?
Yeah. And before we go into that, I want to go back. One of the metaphors that I heard, it was maybe in a peer support meeting or something. But this guy said, unplugging from recovery is kind of like unplugging a refrigerator, right? In the sense that everything looks fine for a while, right? You unplug the refrigerator and the food does
Yeah.
not immediately spoil, right? It might take, depending on the food, it might take 3 days, it might take 5 days, but at some point, everything, the fridge is no longer functioning. But we don't, there's not that immediate feedback all the time to say, okay, I'm actually moving into um, a dysregulated, disconnected space. And
Yeah.
so I really liked that because it speaks to, what the process is for so many people, right? Where there isn't that immediate negative feedback. It's like things another little term that we use in recovery sometimes is, the blessings get in the way of the blessings, right?
Right.
Where things start working and we disconnect from all the reasons that things are working, which to me speaks to sort of a fundamental misconception about how behavioral change works, right?
Yeah.
And you made a comment a couple of episodes ago about, I imagine every single person, I know this to be true, every single person on the planet has things that they know would be good for them, know they should do, and have done in the past to good benefit that they are not doing currently, right? And so these dynamics around behavioral change are not specific to people with
No.
substance use problems. The only challenge is, whether you want to call it a disease or an illness, people with a substance use disorder, on the more severe end, you know, have an illness that left untreated will result in catastrophic
Yeah.
consequences, right?
Exactly. We're talking about a chronic, relapsing, reoccurring terminal illness.
Yep.
So the
Yeah.
stakes are very high.
Stakes are high. Uh, the other thing that you made me think of, maybe a left turn, is it is much easier to let your fitness go than it is to get and stay fit,
Yes.
right? It is much easier to make your house dirty than it is to keep it clean, right? And that's just kind of built into
Yeah.
life, I guess, a principle of life that it's much harder to maintain than it is to let things go, and which, again, fundamental misconception of change is like, I think the biggest one is my motivation or my feelings about making a change are going to are like the main driver for sustaining change. And if
Yes.
you look at, there's research around that, and there's certainly anecdotal experience from both of us to say, motivation is a really small part of that puzzle, right?
Yeah.
The bigger part is, well, that's what we're going to talk about. I think the bigger parts are obviously the preparation, putting in the infrastructure, and then they are those daily habits, which I think we can make it really simple and say that the daily habits that allow us to uh, get our fundamental needs met, right? And what are our
Yes.
fundamental needs? The needs for connection, needs for nervous system regulation, needs for meaning and purpose, not just in our work, but just in our life, right? I think there's a lot of overlap between these different things, right? Meaning and purpose is found in relationship, just as much as it is in anything else, like our work or uh, service, things like that. And then, I think for a lot of people, there's a pharmacological, biological component to that, right? As sort of a support, either with cravings, right? And that's where we talk about MAT, um, or just, sort of regulating the brain, the neurotransmitters using medication. And then exercise is a part of that. I think daily routines and practices. I think sleep. We forget about sleep,
Yeah.
as I think, at least in the field, we forget about sleep as a regulating factor. But I think just having a fully attuned, regulated circadian rhythm has a big impact on people's emotional state and how stress levels, cortisol, right? Sleep has a big impact on that. And then insight and awareness, which is not, that's the other, I'm throwing a lot at you, Stefan, but I think that's another big misconception, is that awareness and insight in and of itself will save the day, and that's a piece, but I think more than anything, that's a piece that promotes taking all those other actions that I just mentioned,
Right.
right? And getting all those needs met.
Yeah. Well, I love the framework for that because I so agree with it. And it is much more than just a simple, I have my individual therapy and
Hmm.
I'm doing some of my peer support or my recovery meetings and that's it. Really, the old joke in recovery is that you only have to change one thing and that's everything.
Yep.
So as we're talking about these habits, these practices, it really is about looking at someone's total lifestyle, but really it's digging into mind, body, spirit.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started in the field, I was going to graduate school, I was managing some sober living homes, and I started to do some recovery coaching. So I would take guys that are out of treatment and help them to maintain the recovery, move the recovery forward, and we would build plans. We would build action plans. Those plans, what we'd do is we'd sit down and we'd look at, well, what are the most important areas of your life that we want to address? What are the goals in those areas of your life, right? So that's the motivation piece. What is it that you want to accomplish? What is your big why? And then we would talk about, well, what do we need to do on a daily and a weekly basis in order to move the needle forward on those important areas of your life? One of the sayings that we have in the recovery space is first things first. Keep first things first. So that was a way of doing that from an action orientation. So we would sit down and we'd say, well, what are those areas? Well, it's my physical health. It's my mental health. It's my spiritual health and my recovery. It's my relationships. If I was working with somebody who was a father, it would be in that role as a father. Who is maybe, if I was working with somebody that had a partner, it was a role of a partner, or a role of an employee, so work, or somebody who was going to school, it would be school, right? So we'd look at all of these different categories. And then we'd look at, okay, on a weekly basis, what are the things that we need to do in each of these areas of life that are the most important things to do?
Yep.
Because what happens for a lot of people is they get overwhelmed and then they get reactive. And all of a sudden we're just running around day in, day out, trying to get things done, trying to be productive, but we don't really know exactly what those things are. And then we get this sense that it's overwhelming and I don't have enough time. That is such a myth. And what's actually true is there is a ton of time. If someone sleeps 8 hours a night, that good sleep that you talked about, there's 112 waking hours every week. And if you get really clear with yourself, if I look at, so for me, right, my categories are, employer, right? So I think about what do I have to do for my staff and my organization, my role as a husband, my role as a father, my role as a man in recovery, as a son. And then I think about what does my self-care look like, mind, body, spirit. That's it. I get really clear with myself what are the most important things. We call these the rocks. What are my big rocks in each of these areas? What are my goals? The most important things for me in each of these areas. How do I want to show up as a husband, as a father, as a man in recovery, as a CEO? What do I have to do to take care of myself, mind, body, spirit, so I can show up as in the best way possible in all of those roles?
Yep.
And then I outline those, and I attend to those, and then anything else I do throughout the week, I mean that's just gravy, that's icing on top. But if I get really clear and really proactive with what are those most important areas, these are the actions, right? What are the areas that I want to take action in? What are the few actions that are going to be most important in those areas? And then I do those and I plan for them. Then I'm going to take care of the things that mean the most to me and the people I care about.
Yep.
So I would do this with guys in new recovery, and we'd sit down, and in a way, there's this simple beauty in early recovery where it's just, I gotta maintain my recovery. What does that look like? What are the few things that I need to do each week that really will keep my recovery going? How do I take care of myself, mind, body, spirit? What are the relationships that I need to lean into, and how am I going to lean into those relationships this week? Am I doing something in a work capacity, vocational or academic with school? What are the things that I need to get done there? Then we make a plan for them, a simple plan for attending to those things, and then we check in and see how it went. And we give ourselves the gift of accountability by sharing with others my plan and some of the things that I want to get done, and then we check back in on it. And how did we do that week, and how did we do those things? When people don't do that, what happens is they're just running around hoping that they're doing the things that need to be done to affect change in a way that they want it. And maybe sometimes they miss, maybe sometimes they hit, but it's very reactive, and it's a lot of it's left up to chance. And the good news, bad news, the bad news is when we leave it up to chance, we then rely too much on how we feel in the moment. And just like your refrigerator analogy, well, it feels pretty cold. I guess it's plugged in. I don't know. Hopefully, right? We rely too much on how we feel, and the problem is you don't necessarily feel it until it's really hot, right? It's the idea of, you sort of get into a pot of water. Here's another analogy for you, Henry. You get into a pot of water, and it's fine. And then little by little, the temperature goes up in the water, right? You're in this big pot, got the ogre making Stefan stew, and I'm sitting in there, and I'm like, it's okay. It's not that hot. And then little by little, the ogre's turning up the heat on this pot of stew, and I don't necessarily feel it until it's too late, and I'm boiling, right? That's what we're trying to avoid here. And that, to me, is really what this action stage is. I've created this sense of motivation, this determination, this why around making this change, right? I've gone through those stages. I've resolved my ambivalence. I want to make a change. I prepared for it. It's then sitting down and thinking, okay, what are all of these things that I'm going to do that's going to, distance myself between me and my addiction? Not only that, though, because I think it's really important to also say it isn't just about what it is that I'm going to try to not do.
Yeah.
It isn't just about preventing a relapse or reoccurrence, reuse of substances. This is also about where is it now that I want to go? Recovery gives me the ability to create in my life, to build, to move towards something that's really exciting, inspiring, something that I want for myself and others in my life. It's about the positive upside. Now that I'm free of the addiction. So what is it that I want to create? Where is it that I want to go? What's this life that I want to build? And how do I start taking little steps every day in that direction? That, to me, is powerful and as much a part of the action stage as it's just doing some stuff in order to not relapse.
Yeah. I think on some level, addiction is, I think you could classify it as a developmental disorder. And what I mean by that is, people use this substance, right? And this may not happen immediately for them, or it happens very immediately, but they use the substance and some of their fundamental human needs are met right there using the substance, which is, the feeling of connection, the feeling of being comfortable, the feeling like they can breathe in their own skin. I mean, that was certainly my experience using substances. And on some level, when you have something that's working better than anything else, you don't really need to engage in all those other areas, or at least you don't think so for a period of time. And I mention that just to say that what you're talking about, right, of moving towards something, of getting our fundamental human needs met, and thriving in our life, I think that's a requirement, right, for a lot of people to get and sustain, to achieve long-term remission from a substance use disorder, is to learn once again, or maybe for the first time, how to meet those needs on a
Yeah.
regular basis, right? So that they create a life where substance use is no longer necessary, needed, or congruent with the life that they're living in recovery.
Yeah.
I think to your point about first things first, right? It shifts from first things first to most immediate first, right? And for most, at least young adult men, that I work with, most immediate usually is work or school and fun. Those three things. And fun, I think all of those are really important. But without it sort of engaging in those daily practices, right, it does become it people do revert back to their hardwiring, which
Yeah.
is what is immediate short-term gain. Even if the immediate short-term gain gain results in long-term consequences, right?
Absolutely. We will trade our future for an immediate relief right now
Yeah.
in active addiction all day long. I think what you said is so important because the most powerful thing is connection
Hmm.
and relationships with others. I'm seeing, and I don't know, Henry, I'd be interested in your opinion on this, where I'm getting a lot of people coming into treatment and their idea of recovery is 5, 6, 7 individual therapy sessions a week.
Hmm.
And I'm a therapist, you're a therapist, right? We love therapy. I believe in
Hmm.
therapy. I do a lot of therapy with people. I have a therapist myself, right?
Yep.
And honestly, if somebody did 7 days a week of therapy, individual sessions, they'd get worse, not better.
Hmm.
And the issue there is, well, of course that's important. But you kind of hit on it. It's sort of insight doesn't necessarily lead to change. Insight and awareness is very, very important. You need that. But
Yeah.
ultimately, where people find recovery and stay in recovery and also achieve higher and higher levels of thriving in life is through relationships and connection.
Hmm.
So we have to create environments and motivation and plans that allow people to create deep and authentic relationships with others that will allow them to really experience the full benefits of recovery and that happiness, that thriving. We talk a lot about positive recovery, and what I mean by that is the old paradigm of addiction treatment was really almost 100% based on relapse prevention,
Hmm.
refusal skills, and a lot of that's important and it's good work. The problem is it left often people in this place where it's like, well, I'm not using it anymore, but my life is pretty terrible, and I'm
Hmm.
not getting any better. Right? A lot of that stuff that you said, Henry, my fundamental needs around love, connection, relationships, sense of accomplishment, achievement, meaning, purpose, right? If how often did you hear, if this is what life is like
Hmm.
sober, I might as well start using again.
Yep.
So when you say it's a must, to me, thriving and joy and happiness and connection is as important than those refusal skills and that relapse prevention. So positive recovery is this idea that you take the principles of positive psychology. Positive psychology is the area of psychology that looks not at symptoms of distress, but looks at symptoms of thriving.
Hmm.
So you take those principles, and it's really very simple. It's based on how do I cultivate positive emotion, sense of engagement. So engagement is that idea that I'm plugged into something that pulls my full attention, right? I'm thriving. I'm in the flow, right? They talk about the flow, the zone. So
Yep.
positive emotion, activities that cultivate engagement, deep, authentic relationships. The happiest people on the planet are the ones that have the best relationships. That has been studied relentlessly and been found to be true every single time. The happiest people on the planet Earth are those that have both breadth and depth of relationships. So they have a lot of
Yep.
relationships, but they have good, deep relationships. Sense of meaning and purpose. And meaning and purpose is often misunderstood. It isn't that I woke up one day and neuroscientist, rocket surgeon hit me in the face and now I know what I'm supposed to do in my life. What meaning and purpose means is I've gotten really clear around what my values are and what's important to
Hmm.
me, and I've learned how to live in alignment with those values. So I get to show up in meaningful and purposeful ways and in anything that I do.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden I feel deep sense of meaning and purpose.
Hmm.
And then the last one is really a sense of accomplishment and achievement, that I'm moving forward, I'm developing and growing in ways that I care about, right? So the acronym for that is PERMA: positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, achievement, accomplishment. You and I then add in, and then also what do I have to do for my recovery and my mental health?
Yep.
That's positive recovery, right? So as we build this action plan and as we look at what are those things that we're going to be doing, what are all of the legs of this table? It's another metaphor that I love as I think about my recovery and my life is this just gorgeous, beautiful crystal vase, right? Or this beautiful crystal statue. It's incredible, but it's also delicate. So I want to protect it. So I put it on this table. Well, I want to make sure that's a very stable table, right? A stable table. Whoa, look at that.
Stable table.
We're rhyming now, Henry. We're really flowing. So what are all the legs that I'm going to put underneath of this table? That to me is these actions. And I want to put a lot of legs under this table because I don't know at some point which ones are actually supporting and holding it up because you can't feel it. It isn't this felt sense of. So I put all these legs under this table because at some point one of them might leave for a bit or come back, but I want enough of them there so that my recovery is on firm ground up there. This beautiful crystal statue that is gorgeous and the most important thing in my life, but also very delicate, isn't going to fall and crash and break.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. What if I think back in my own personal recovery journey to, if I was able to sort of narrow it down to what is the skill set that has helped me more than any other out of scrapes and hard times and and good times and sort of making progress, it's the phone.
Yep.
It's the phone. It's making phone calls, right? And I've done a lot of other things. I've done therapeutic intensives. I have a therapist. I go to 12-step meetings. I have a spot. All those things. I've done tons of things to develop insight and education, and the phone has saved the day more than anything else,
Yep.
right?
Yep. It's
And
the
going back
action.
to action, it's like how do we support ourselves in sustaining the action stage of change? I think it is in community, in relationship, and having regular reminders, which is accountability in and of itself, right? Um, of the path that I'm trying to walk, right? What I'm trying to do. And, that I think also speaks to preparation in the sense that how do I sort of involve myself? How do people involve themselves in a community that the general expectation, right, is that we do recovery, that we do
Yep.
healthy things, that we support each other. That I think, and there's good research behind that too, right? That social modeling and the group that we're in, it's another little recovery phrase is the person you want to be in 5 years is contingent on the people you're around and the books you read, and the books you read are contingent on the people you're around. So
Yep.
it's like, how do we involve ourselves in that community? I wanted to draw a parallel too for families because one of the things that we talked about when we first started was, how the addiction treatment field fails. And I think we're getting better at this, but uh, the support structure for families, a majority of the time, certainly in the advent of 30-day, residential treatment, was the 3-day family program,
Yep.
right? Which is educational primarily. It was a bunch of psychoeducation around addiction and triggers and relapse prevention and things like that. Um, and to me, I would draw a parallel with the 7 days of individual therapy there, because really, we have good research to say that education on its own is not incredibly significant in producing behavioral change, right? An important piece, an awareness builder, something that's important because it adds a context to what we're talking about. But in and of itself, it doesn't produce change because motivation is fluid, right? That
Yes.
initial motivation that you get after a family program uh, fades over time, right? And
Yeah.
and if there's no infrastructure to support it, families end up kind of in the same position, which I think for me, what I see more than anything else is our okayness is very much centered around our loved one getting better, right? Which produces a whole bunch of problems that I'm sure we'll talk more about. And what I've seen for families that produces the most positive change is a peer group.
Yes.
Just like with the person with the substance use disorder, right? A peer group of other families that are trying to do the same thing, walk through this, the most difficult time of their life in a lot of ways, uh, and who are reminded regularly of what they're trying to do, right? Which
You
is
bet.
to show up in alignment with their own values, to get their own needs met, right? To do that separate and apart in a parallel process, right? I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Yep.
That might be trademarked, but a parallel process uh, of recovery, right, alongside their loved one. And on one of the things that we've talked about that families can do to support their loved one too is that actually makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
Them modeling that behavior of consistency and action and remaining in the action stage of change. Actually, again, sort of they're part of that group for their loved one of we're moving forward and we're doing recovery.
Yeah. The family's continuing to do the work.
Yeah, yeah,
You brought up such a great point because the educational component, that psychoeducational component, necessary but not sufficient.
yeah,
And I often work with families that have sent their loved one to treatment 5, 6, 10, 15 times. And they often push back on the family services component because they say, I've done it. I've
yeah,
heard I listen, I'm sure you've got a great neuroscience of addiction lecture. I've heard it 15 times. I don't need to hear it again. So I don't
yeah,
need to take part in that. It's not my problem. It's their problem. They need to get it right. The same is true for the clients. A
mhm,
lot of my clients, this isn't about an educational issue. This isn't about knowledge. They could teach most of the psychoeducational groups, just like the families could probably teach some of the psychoeducational
mhm,
groups about family systems and addiction. This is about the action and the work
yeah,
and continuing to stay in the action and continuing to stay in the work. And I mean, I'm coming up on 2 decades of recovery. I still call people all the time to ask for
mhm,
help and support and guidance and wisdom, right? It's a recovery action that is part of my repertoire of skills and tools, just like you mentioned, that phone.
yeah,
The same needs to be true for the families.
mhm,
Because you talked about it's dynamic, recovery is dynamic, but life is dynamic.
mhm,
And hearing some things and getting some education in a very safe, curated environment is very different than it's 1 a.m. and Johnny calls.
yeah,
What am I going to do?
yeah,
How am I going to, with all of the triggers and the fear and all the things going on, how am I going to maintain my commitment of supporting recovery and discontinuing to enable active use and addiction in the
yeah.
moment at 1 a.m.?
And families, again, that parallel process is true for addiction too, right? Where, uh, just like education is important up until the point that your nervous system is dysregulated and
Right.
then it doesn't work at all, right?
No.
And that's brain science, right? That's the part of your brain that could bring that to mind and use it to make decisions is no longer active, right? And the return to use happens. That's true for families too, right?
Yep.
Where uh, I may know what enabling is. I may understand boundaries. I may even understand how the nervous system works, right? I may have all that education and probably do around why I need to not pay for another hotel room, knowing what's going to happen, right, at 1 a.m. in the morning with the loved one. Um, but that all that information is no longer accessible,
Right.
right? And so
Prefrontal cortex offline.
offline, right? And so what in those moments, what is going to click into gear, right, to support those families? It's the things that they've been preconditioned to do,
Yep.
right? And in the past, the preconditioning has been around reactivity. It's been around, solving the immediate crisis. And if we can precondition for recovery behaviors, then over time, those start to become online and active almost immediately, right? And without conscious thought, right?
Yep.
But that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, and more than anything, a lot of repetition.
A lot of reps, man. A lot of reps. We
Yep.
got to get this into our muscle memory.
Yep.
And I love what you said, because the most important muscle memory is my prefrontal cortex is offline, so I need to borrow yours.
Yep.
Right? How often do we do that for each other? Right? It's like I'm calling you, and I'm saying, Henry, I'm super triggered. This is what's going on. I now have advantage of your prefrontal cortex, right? And at the same way, this is super important, because what happens here is we haven't even talked about this, but there's a phenomenon around co-regulation,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
humans are designed to regulate off of each other and to mirror each other. So another big part of sticking around people that understand recovery, that are in recovery, that are supportive of my recovery, and I develop a habit and a skill out of reaching out to them consistently. So when it's game time, I don't have to use willpower to make that happen. It just happens because I'm conditioned. I've practiced it. It's in my muscle memory. My nervous system's dysregulated, but yours is not. So
Yep.
if I start to engage with you in person or even on the phone, my nervous system will start to react to your nervous system, which means it'll start to bring it down. I'll start to regulate. You don't even, and that's the beauty of this, is often when I'm calling you or you're calling me, or we're struggling and we're connecting with other people, it isn't even necessarily that I need them to come up with some sort of brilliant idea for me or even
Right.
tell me what to do. That's the whole, well, I've heard it before. That's not what it's about. It's not actually sometimes about hearing something new or clever or having a solution.
Education.
It's actually just about connection. And in that connection, I'm going to start to feel better. My nervous system's going to come down. I'm going to get back in charge of my prefrontal cortex. It'll come back online. And the next thing I'll know what to do because I've done the work, right? So then I won't react. I will put some space in between stimulus and response, right? In that space, I'll bring myself back to my recovery-oriented experience, but through connection with others, and then rather than react, I'll get to respond in a way that's in alignment with the person that I want to be and the type of recovery I want to have, the type of family recovery, what I decided and committed to as a mom of how I was going to work with my loved one, right? All that stuff.
This may be kind of funny, coming from someone whose entire job is to support families and give them feedback and direction around and action plans around next steps. But I think there's another trap that families can fall into, which is constantly seeking the professional guidance. And what I've seen, to the point where it's like that's the first call is always to the professional to solve the issue or to make the person less anxious. And I'm not saying that's not necessary and or not good or not what I'm there to do, right? Is to on some level help families to feel supported as they walk through one of the most difficult times of their entire life. But what I've found and what my goal is long term is to help families get to a place where they can call a peer, right? Someone who has been through this as a family member, who has walked through it, who is armed with tools and skills, because I think that connection
Yeah.
is fundamentally different than the professional connection, right?
Yep.
And that goes back to what you said about, sounds like we're knocking therapy, but 7 days of individual therapy. It's like without that peer who's walking alongside us doing the exact same thing, trying to get better. I think there's something different about that. And I do like one of the things that we have done as a field that I think is really positive is sort of invested more in peer support roles, right? Professionalized peer support roles. because it is different, right? It is sort of a different conversation. Um, and it's not necessarily educational. It's based on I've been there, you've been there. Let's, like I said, share each other's regulation for a moment so I
Yeah.
can make a decision that's in alignment with my values. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I've got something to say. I don't know what it was that I was going to say, but I love what you said there because that's also a big deal. Like the professional isn't always going to be there,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
that professional relationship is transactional in a way.
Yep.
It's where the pure relationship is not. It's purely relational,
Hmm.
and a peer is going to answer the phone whenever, anytime, day
Yeah.
or night, especially if you've got a group of them. I remember I was in a moment of crisis early in my recovery, and it was late at night. And because I had developed the habit of picking up the phone, I was able to pick up the phone. And the first person didn't answer because it was late at night.
Yeah.
And the second person didn't answer, but the third person did.
Hmm.
Right? And I was able to get support with a peer and regulate.
Yeah.
And I think it's also really important because I'll talk with a lot of family members that they'll push back against sometimes connecting with a community of other family members in recovery. And they'll have a lot of reasons for that. They'll say, well, I sometimes feel like I can't relate, or it's just too depressing, or I don't like, whatever it is. But ultimately, it isn't so much sometimes about the content, it's about creating those relationships. Because you need somebody that understands recovery and understands what you're going through and what you've been through. And it doesn't mean that your other friends aren't great and that your minister and your lawyer and your priest and your rabbi aren't great. They're all great. And if they don't understand recovery, they're not going to be able to support you in a way that you need. It doesn't mean that you have to disengage from those friendships or they can't still be maybe your best friends. But you also need to have a group of people that really understand the nuance of recovery and have been there before. They're the ones in recovery critical moments are going to be the ones that can support you. Because what we've learned as family members is so much of the action that we need to take in supporting a loved one in recovery and addiction is actually a little counterintuitive.
Hmm.
So your minister, priest, rabbi, bridesmaid, best friend, bridge companion, player, I don't know, whatever, they might give you very well-meaning advice that is completely counterproductive and wrong and is going to not be helpful when it comes down
Yeah.
to it, right? And often they're more likely to just co-sign than they are to maybe give the right feedback.
Hmm.
Even if that feedback is, I hear what you're saying, and I understand why you want to do that. We're not going to do that, right? Don't do
Yeah.
that. Someone that's a real friend in recovery that can say,
Yeah.
I love you, and I hear what you're saying, and you're wrong.
Yeah. I love you enough to hurt your feelings,
Yep.
right? To some degree, or for you to be mad at me. Stefan, to kind of close this up, I would love to hear maybe a four-sentence summary of the action stage of change. What can people do, both families and people struggling with substance use, to support and bolster themselves as they sit in the action stage of change?
Well, I can't even say my name in 4 sentences. So I would say action is identifying all of the things that are going to support the most important areas of your life. So identifying what are my needs, what is it that I'm going to do to address those needs, what are the things that I'm going to do that are going to support my recovery, mind, body, spirit, what are the actions that I can take that will also move the needle forward in the areas of my life that I most care about. then developing a plan and planning for those to happen. So proactivity, where are they going to fit into his schedule?
Yeah.
And then staying accountable to it. So measuring those things, checking into them, right? So if I decided that I needed to go to the gym 4 times, did I go to the gym 4 times? And how did I feel about it, right? If I decided that I needed to meditate 5 days, did I meditate 5 days? How did I feel about it? That I needed to connect with 6 people in recovery this week in meaningful fellowship, did I do that? And how do I feel, right? So staying accountable to it. And then what we didn't really talk about, Henry, was the maintenance stage, which is honestly the most important, right? So you take all of these recovery actions, you get yourself into solid, fulfilled, thriving recovery, and then how are you monitoring yourself and keeping yourself accountable so that you continue to do those things? So that you continue to make sure that the fridge is plugged in so the food stays fresh and it stays cold, right? And that to me is again, where we have to become the master of the mundane, where it's becomes about taking that daily vitamin, right? Maintaining consistency so we we keep our recovery fitness rather than lose it. So that was way more than 4 sentences is what you gave me. I don't know. That was at least 40, but
You did great.
what would you say? What would be yours?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, preparation and action are so intricately linked, right? In the sense that we're developing a plan and an infrastructure and supports to engage in, like you said, the mundane, the regular, sort of chop wood, carry water of recovery, right? These basic actions that we engage in on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis, and then you know, surrounding ourselves with stimulus that reminds us of the action steps that we're trying to take, right? Having a community that is supportive of that, right? And models the behaviors that we're trying to do in our own life. And then I think it is also cultivating the attitude of, there is a discipline component around. We're cultivating the attitude of, and I want to be careful here because it's nuanced, not our feelings don't matter, right? But the concept of, regardless of how I feel, and there's caveats to this too that we could go into, but regardless of how I feel, there's some things that I need to do
Yes.
often, sort of without fail, right? And obviously we're not perfect. Nobody is saying that we need to be perfect, right? But um, if we can make recovery actions sort of like flossing, right, or drinking water, or taking a shower, just mundane tasks that I think most people would, even in their busiest moments, would probably brush their teeth, right? How do we make these behaviors like that,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like, well, whether I'm in, New York City, or I'm at home in Carbondale, or I'm in, across the world, I'll still brush my teeth, right?
Yep.
That's something that I will generally do every day.
Yep.
And how do we get there,
That's
right?
right.
And then how do we maintain that over time? Because on some level, this is just repetition that, the metaphor I thought about as we were talking about the gym and physical fitness is, and you could fact check me on this, but my understanding is the first couple months, if you're weightlifting, right, and you're trying to achieve muscle mass, trying to bulk up, the first couple months, you may be lifting more weight, but your muscles are not actually changing. It's your nervous system or your skeletal structure. It's something like
Yeah.
that, just becoming attuned to lifting more weight, but your muscles are not actually changing. It takes
Yeah.
time and consistency for months and months and months and months before you start to see a fundamental change in your body, right? And the same is true with recovery, I think, right?
Yep.
It takes months and months and years. Um, and obviously there's benefits throughout. to get to a place where that is an automatic habit that you just engage in. It's who you are at that point.
Yep.
And that
Yeah,
sort of bleeds into maintenance. But
absolutely. I mean, we are in the action stage for 2 years.
yeah,
Then we're in the maintenance stage.
yeah,
But the first 2 years of recovery is action stage. It's building, it's developing, it's getting to that baseline, and then we're in maintenance after that. We're not in maintenance after 28 days.
yep,
Our brain
yes,
isn't even healed in 28, not even close. So,
yep.
well said, Henry. I love it. I love it,
Me
brother.
too.
Beyond relapse. Here we go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Talk again soon.
I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay.
Take care.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.